It's no secret that woke ideology has taken over America's colleges and universities. One result of the left seizing control of academia is that these un-American ideas are being pumped into our culture, with things such as DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's basically state and corporate sanctioned racism. It's judging people and treating them differently because of their skin colors. Just one university, for example, the University of Virginia, has a whopping 235 DEI employees. It costs taxpayers $20 million a year. And Wokeness on X shared some of the salaries of these DEI enforcers, and again, that's just one school. Many of these staffers make more than college professors, many lawyers and doctors. They have huge six-figure salaries. These institutions have been able to implement these radical policies because they sound nice on the surface, like who doesn't want inclusion, right? But the policies have actually become a discriminator racket. They're using it to line the pockets of radical activists, all while attacking the core principles of Western civilization, principles we hold near and dear, such as individualism, equal opportunity, and fair treatment, and most importantly, success based on merit. For example, we learned with the Supreme Court's affirmative action case last year that Harvard is giving certain students with certain skin colors preferential treatment in admissions. So for example, according to Harvard admissions data, white students in the top academic decile, in other words, the best performing students, had a 15% admissions rate to the school. Asians were even less, at 12%. Yet by contrast, black students with the same academic performance were admitted 56% of the time. Again, that's just compared to 15% of the time and 12% of the time with whites and Asians. Hispanics were at over a third of the time. And the same is true of medical school admissions. In 2018, the American Enterprise Institute used data from the Association of American Medical Colleges to examine this question. AEI found that for med school applicants with average GPAs and entrance exam scores, black students had an over 80% chance of being admitted to med school. 80%. Average scores, average GPAs. White and Asian students, meanwhile, were at less than 30%. So again, if you were of a certain approved skin color, a skin color that the powers that be have decided needs to be helped, you could get in at a rate of 80% with average scores. It's astounding. One governor of the United States, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's tried to push back against this. He signed a law last year that forced universities to fire all their diversity, equity, and inclusion staff. The University of Florida just followed through with that earlier this week. Here's Governor DeSantis back in 2013 discussing the rationale for signing this into law.
In reality, what this concept of DEI has been is to attempt to impose orthodoxy on the university, and not even necessarily in the classroom, but through the administrative apparatus of the university itself, and that manifests itself in a number of different ways, but this has basically been used as a veneer to impose an ideological agenda, and that is wrong. And in fact, if you look at the way this has actually been implemented across the country, DEI is better viewed as standing for discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions.
Governor DeSantis is right. It is a veneer. And yet for pointing that out, for pointing out that students, regardless of their skin color or background, should be treated equally, they should be treated based on the merit of their work and their performance, he's been branded an extremist. In the name of DEI, the left is also now erasing womanhood. They want Americans to ignore thousands of years of cultural and biological teachings to believe that there are no differences between men and women. There are no differences between the two genders. And worse, they're also pushing that with gruesome surgeries, with sex change surgeries, or even drugs, you can actually change your sex. One organization that's trying to sound the alarm about this is called SAVE. It stands for Stop Abusive and Violent Environments. The group works to assure that the federal Title IX law is applied consistently and fairly to all students, both male and female. And that's exactly how the federal government has gone about pushing these changes, through Title IX. SAVE is particularly concerned about the Biden administration potentially adding transgender identity as a protected class under the Title IX law. So again, we've already told you how the ideology is already wreaking havoc on women's sports across schools, across universities. Biological men are now pretending that they are women, and we are allowing this. The NCAA is allowing this. Colleges and universities are allowing this. We're all pretending it's normal. They want everyone to act like the guy wearing the female swimsuit or the guy playing basketball amongst the girls and is dominating them. They want us to act like that's normal and that it's not a problem and it's not a threat to women. And so they're competing against these women and they're beating them. Again, all in the name of transgender inclusion, transgender equity. And so as a result, when you have all these things, transgender inclusion thus becomes female exclusion. It's all part of the transformation of America, the trans redefinition of America, the redefinition of gender. So joining us now to discuss more of this is the founder of SAVE. He's got a career with academic experience from Johns Hopkins. He's a former federal regulator at the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Edward Bartlett. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, great to see you, Eduardo.
I want to ask you, and I want to read the statistics so I don't get this wrong. Some of the reason why Title IX, in one way, was put into place was to bring equality, equal opportunities for women in higher education. And so there was certainly an argument for that at the time that the law was passed. But if you look at over the last several decades, and you look at the discrepancy between, as an example, one example, degrees and the discrepancy in how many degrees women earn versus men. I mean, since Title IX since a 1982 law that further pushed Title IX, have been 13 million more women who've gotten college degrees than men. Women now account for over 60% of degrees. And so, what would be the argument now for requiring that? I mean, we always hear this in society, that women and men have it unequal, that they're not treated fairly. But do you think we've tipped the scale in a certain way? Because it seems as though in order to do that, we're now doing many things. I mean, in order to bring equality, we're both erasing women on the trans issue, but then we're also denigrating men in a certain way. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's so many contradictions. And by the way, you did a great introduction there. There's so many contradictions going on here. We're really looking at an assault on the truth, an assault on the truth, on the American way of life, on the Constitution, on the family, you name it. It truly is a vast, multifaceted assault on what we as Americans believe and what we stand for. So yes, the percentage of males enrolled in colleges, undergraduate, is now down to 42%, and that number keeps slipping inexorably year by year. And people wonder, well, how the heck has this happened? Well, when you think about it, the answer kind of jumps out at least it jumps out at me. So going way back, you may remember that Department of Education decreed that they were going to require an equal proportion of women in women's sports than men in men's sports. Of course, as a result, a lot of male sports teams were phased out. Then in 2011, there was this Dear Colleague letter under the Obama administration that essentially stereotyped men as sexual predators, and then we have this growth of women's studies program. If you look at them, they're nothing about women's history per se. They're all about patriarchal oppression and how awful things are for women, which of course is a bunch of hooey. And then another thing that many people are not aware of, hundreds, if not thousands of colleges have scholarships, guess what? Only for females. So we're seeing in so many ways, and we haven't even talked about, and we should add, of course, DEI to that list of, call it a hostile environment that we've created for male students. Put all that together in a package, say, wow, no wonder we have this decline, this radical decline in the male population in colleges.
And what do you think the effect of that has been? Because I think when you point that out, when I've pointed it out before, and when academics like Mark Perry at AEI have done research and published the numbers on this, they get attacked as, oh, you're a woman hater, you're a misogynist. But again, I think there is a real effect on society when you have such a huge discrepancy. I mean, 60-40, it'll probably with the next generation could be pushing 70-30 for all we know. And so what do you have happen in an economy and in a country where most men don't even have a college degree, and there's this discrepancy in education level? I mean, in one example, just for the audience, studies show that women are less likely to date or marry men who have, a lesser degree than them and who make less money than they do. And so if you're creating a vast pool of people in an entire generation where there are those educational and income level discrepancies, then you're going to see marriage rates decline and things like that, which of course has a whole host of other effects on society. So what are some of the causes of this, or what do you think we're going to see here in the near future, aside from that example of this discrepancy between men and women in higher education?
Well, it's really Marxist ideology gone wild. And why do I say that? Because first of all, feminism is based on Marxist thinking and Marxist theories. So like any totalitarian ideology, feminism has not stopped when they reach the point of gender equality. the college enrollments is a perfect example. They didn't stop pushing, for these, more gender studies programs, or, I mean, they kept pushing this. That's how totalitarian ideologies work. Bottom line is they keep using this this term they call the patriarchy. Well, that's just crazy. There is no patriarchy. I don't think there ever was a patriarchy. So so feminists are really, they're pushing this ideology, and they're pushing this Marxist terminology. And as you say, it harms the entire society. Marriage rates are going down, birth rates are going down. You may be aware that there's a absolute mental health crisis right now among young liberal women. 56% of young liberal women have been told by a healthcare provider that they have a mental health problem. Wow, think about that. So the ramifications of this, reshaping society into this Marxist feminist vision are having widespread, devastating effects.
And you're absolutely right on the mental health numbers. For anyone in the audience who doubts that, I invite you to look it up. I mean, the demographic group that is most likely to be on some sort of prescription drug for depression or mental health is white liberal women, and it's sad. And you also have the mental health issue of men on the other side, increasing suicides, and of course we can go through the effects of the pandemic. Doctor, two more questions really quickly. I think we only have about 2 minutes here. I'm glad you mentioned the Dear Colleague letter. One, if you could walk the audience through some of these kangaroo courts that started sprouting up on college campuses where men were guilty without even having a trial. They were guilty before, and they had to prove their own innocence, rather. And then secondly, on the transgender thing, I want to go back to that before we close. Are you hopeful that this will be defeated by the Biden administration either in the next election, or what will be the state, if it goes through, of gender relations on college campuses if we just erase what the meaning of male and female are?
I'll answer your second question first. The answer is absolutely, it will be reversed. It has to be reversed, or else our society is going to literally fall apart at the seams. To answer your first question, yes, many people have heard of these kangaroo courts, which of course refers to a college disciplinary committee that has no concept of due process or presumption of innocence. You may have heard of this. Actually, was a faculty member at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, and he himself was sexually assaulted by a female at a party there. And so when he went to complain about this assault, his complaint was simply ignored. Well, ultimately, he sued the university. Ultimately, and this was last December, a jury awarded a historic $15 million jury award against Thomas and Jefferson University for failing to recognize, to her ignoring the fact that he had complained about this sexual assault.
In other words, and sorry, doctor, I got to cut you off for running out of time. In other words, because he was a man. And so that's the state of college campuses, where men and women are treated differently based on their claims and their allegations, and men are demonized. Dr. Edward Bartlett, founder of SAVE, thanks so much for joining us. Sorry we ran out of time.
My pleasure.